Hello and welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. We're just a few weeks out from Halloween now, and I'm reviewing some of my all-time favorite horror films. This week, I'd like to talk about a 1980 film that was directed by the greatest director of all time, Mr. Stanley Kubrick. It stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers. I'm talking about none other than The Shining. This is one of the most horrifying films ever made. It was, like I said, directed by the great Stanley Kubrick. That's probably all you need to know as far as the quality of the film, if you're a Stanley Kubrick fan like I am. This movie tells the tale of Jack Torrance and his wife Wendy and their son Danny. Jack was a school teacher in Maine. He lost his job. They moved up to Colorado. He takes the job as the winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel, which is about 15 miles up in the mountains outside of Sidewinder. Once they get up there, the day that they move in, while Jack and Wendy are going around with the hotel manager, Dick Halloran, the hotel chef, takes Danny for some ice cream, and that's when he discusses with Danny a ability he senses that Danny has and that he also has. It's a psychic ability to be able to see events from the past and the future, as well as talk to other people with the same ability without speaking. Dick tells him that him and his grandmother used to use this ability to communicate, and she referred to it as the Shining. Now, after everyone's gone, bizarre things begin to happen in the hotel. Danny begins to have these horrifying visions, and Jack, his father, in his own way, we see possibly has the Shining as well, though he doesn't realize he has it. And it causes him to slowly, as the film goes along, to slip into madness, to the point where toward the end of the film he's convinced that he needs to murder his family. So he gets an axe and he goes after Wendy and Danny. He tries to kill them. They manage to escape him. Before he went on his rampage, Danny was able to reach out to Dick Halloran using The Shining, and Dick arrives in a snowcat and tries to help Danny and Wendy, but unfortunately he is killed by Jack just shortly after he arrives at the hotel. Jack chases Danny outside the hotel into the hedge maze. Pardon me there, mouth is a little dry. During the chase in the hedge maze, Danny is able to trick him, get away from him. He finds his mother waiting for him outside the maze. They get in the snowcat and head down the mountain, and Jack is left behind and ultimately freezes to death in the maze. That's just a quick synopsis of the story. I don't want to give away too much. This is a movie that just demands to be watched and interpreted by the viewer. So many people interpret this movie in so many different ways. I'm not even going to go into the various ways the film can be interpreted. Just know that this is a very, very frightening film, one of the greatest of all time. Excuse me. Jack Nicholson was quoted as saying shortly after the wrapping of this film that because of his demandingness, he would never work for Stanley Kubrick again. Kubrick was a slave driver and just far too demanding of his cast and crew. Of course, as the years went by, Nicholson softened on this position and eventually said that he actually learned a lot from Kubrick and would cherish the opportunity to work with him again. Unfortunately, Kubrick died at a fairly young age, and that, of course, will never happen. Shelley Duvall, on the other hand, did not have a pleasurable experience with Kubrick. He was very rude, obnoxious, cruel to her, would say nasty, mean things to her in front of the other cast members and the crew. And it was later found out that he did this because Wendy's character in his vision was a frail, mentally beaten down woman, and Shelley Duvall was a little bit too headstrong, a little too independent, so Kubrick used this method to wear her down so that her performance would be more along the lines of the way he saw Wendy. he got what he wanted out of Shelley Duvall by doing that. And from what I've heard, he did try to reconcile with her after the film and apologize, but she was so hurt by the way he had treated her that never really came to pass. And as far as I know, Shelley Duvall still has a hatred for Stanley Kubrick that persists to this day. Scatman Crothers, this was one of his last film appearances. I think this movie was made just not too long before he passed away, but he does a great job as Dick Halloran. Scatman was just an extremely talented actor. He was great in anything he did. He made quite a big career out of doing voiceovers for a lot of Saturday morning children's cartoons. You've probably heard his voice and never even realized it was him. But overall, The Shining is absolutely one of the finest horror films ever made. If you are a fan of horror and you have not seen The Shining, first of all, you should be ashamed of yourself. Once you've gotten past that, you need to get out, find it. I'm sure it's available on multiple streaming formats. It's available on DVD, Blu-ray. There's just many ways you can find this film. You've got to seek it out and watch this movie if you haven't. Because like I keep saying, and I can't say it enough, it's one of the finest, greatest horror films ever made. It is an epic length horror film. It's your average horror movie has a runtime of 90 to 100 minutes. This film is close to 3 hours long. It's a slow burn. It's the tone is set right away at the very beginning of the film with the low angle helicopter shots of the landscape as we see Jack's car driving up the winding mountain road to the hotel, and just the bleakness of the landscape, and then the chilling music that it's set with. We get that bleak, dark, macabre tone set right off the bat, and the movie just never looks back. It just sticks with that tone all the way through. It just slowly builds and builds, and it's by the time you get to the climax, it's just like, ugh. In one way, you hate that it's over, but on the other hand, you're like, oh, thank God, because I don't know how much more of that I could have took. It's one of those type of films. I really think you're going to really, really enjoy it. So I highly recommend The Shining. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this week's review. Join me back next week where I'll be reviewing another horror movie as we just get that much closer to Halloween. And until then, y'all take care.